sister Nancy Murray is a Dominican sister from Adrian in Michigan, USA. She brings the story of St. Catherine of Siena to life by acting it out as a one-woman drama in churches and other locations, mainly in her own country, the USA. But on the 18th of October 2014, she will be bringing the drama to Vancouver in Canada. It will be performed at St. Mary's Church as part of an all-day symposium for lay Catholics. Sister Nancy, thank you for bringing the story of St. Catherine to Vancouver, and we look forward to seeing you here.
I am grateful for the invitation.
Could you tell us what is the aim of the drama on St. Catherine?
Well, I titled the program, Catherine of Siena, A Woman for Our Times. So I would say that the aim of it is to see how both the history of the 14th century, with some of its struggles and troubles and wars and plagues and scandals in the church, there's a parallel with our 21st century. Also, to make people realize how a young girl born in Italy without any education, didn't have the opportunity to go to school at all, was able to be such a good vessel for God, to be able to be a peacemaker, a healer, a mystic, and to show to so many people that all things are possible with God. In telling this story, I start with her family life, and she has a child. Catherine is a child. And so you see some of the jealousies between brothers and sisters, and some of their fighting, and some of the power struggles, and a little bit of the mother and daughter, teen daughters, wills beating up against each other. No violence, though, believe me. And about what a darling she was to her father, and how her strong will was in conflict sometimes with her mother and dad, but that she somehow had a sense of being loved by God and kept responding to ways that brought her further down a road out of her city into the world. For people to look at that and find themselves in that story.
That sounds wonderful. How do people get inspired by St. Catherine's story, and what is it that they typically take home from it?
Well, it's interesting, Mark, because I've done this program for grade school children, high schools, parish groups, women's spirituality groups, seminaries, and I think everyone finds themselves in her story, and that is what's beautiful. One of the things that people are surprised with is that how I start with her family life. I'm from a big family, only 9. She was number 23 of 24. And yet to see how the work world of the family life, the taking responsibility for each other in family life, is all still very relevant to family life today. So to have young students see how, whether it's the vision she first had when she was about 7 years old, or it was, mother and dad had plans for her as a teenager, which was to get married. They already had chosen her husband. And to see how her strong will, and yet kind of working with what were possibilities, she was able to follow her path, a dream, a plan that she felt was for her. And even if it meant changing her mind when she thought just to be praying with God was going to be the way it was going to be, me and God. And God said, oh no, I'm sending you out. You've got to learn to walk on 2 feet, love of God and love of neighbor. What? And so her surprise and shock with that. And haven't we all known where we had a plan in our life and it changed? Something happened that let us know that there was going to be some new way we were being led or called. So I think that, and interesting too is sometimes people will think it's a story for girls. But there's so many men in the stories between her brothers and her father and priests and bishops and popes, but just the relationship that she had with so many different people, and who befriended her, who was threatened by her, who encouraged her. And so I think people can see that it's not a straight road in becoming a saint, but following it. And for this young woman who became a lay Dominican. Many people think that because she was in the habit, is pictured always in the habit, that she was a nun, and that was not so. It was, she would put the mantle on when she would be going out to do her works of mercy. Well, once she was given that opportunity, she never stopped doing works of mercy. So it became her life, a life of service and love.
And I believe she had quite a following. She had many people following her around Italy. Were they kind of disciples, do you think?
Some were, and there were some artists, and there were some poets and people of upper class too that were drawn to her, and saw that there was some kind of a wisdom in this young girl that was most impressive, very inspiring, and that the Montellata group that she joined, the lay Dominican women who were widows, as she joined them, men also wanted to join, to be a part of this. And she was very grateful because they could read, and she most loved to hear the book of the Psalms read. But, so to see how, as a group then, they moved, and as she started to be writing letters to different leaders, church leaders and political leaders, when she was encouraged by her spiritual director, Raymond of Capua, to go and see some of these leaders. They need to see the passion that you speak with. And so to see how her relationship with people grew. And so she was kind of a magnet in many ways, where people were drawn to her and wanted to be a part of what she was doing. And it really encouraged that kind of involvement. And we see people in our generation who have an insight or a vision, and they want people to follow them, and not because they see themselves as the heroes, but because the cause is so important, the mission, the preaching that needs to be done.
Will this be the first time that you've done this drama in Canada?
Yes, it is. I did get up to Alaska and did it up there a few years ago. So I went north of you, and I went east of you, and I went to Edinburgh, Scotland for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and also to Rome and World Youth Day in Germany, in Cologne, and also in Madrid. In Madrid, I did it in Spanish, and also in Lima, Peru, Ecuador, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Mexico, and then was invited to be a part of the International Dominican Youth Movement that was held in Manila, and then traveled around there because we have Dominican sisters there. And they made connections with Taiwan, Indonesia, East Timor, and met with sisters and schools and universities and catechist training programs, and met with all sorts of groups. And then Australia was another country where I spent 3 months going to Dominican schools all over the place. And so this girl has given me a passport to the world, I must admit, something I never would have expected.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like you're well traveled. Now, you come from a family of actors, including your brother Bill Murray, who has featured in several Hollywood movies. Do you enjoy sharing the same interests as your siblings?
I do, and yet I'm not as savvy on everything that's happening in Hollywood and who's doing what. And some of my sisters are much more tuned into what actors and stars or whatever. I'm not as starstruck, but I do enjoy it, and I've enjoyed when two of my brothers have invited me to their parishes and introduced me then to do Catherine of Siena in their parish. And my brother Bill actually came to Adrian last week on his way back from the Toronto Film Festival, where his newest movie, St. Vincent, was premiered. And so when he came and stayed overnight on his way back home, and I said, Billy, this is great. St. Vincent gets to meet St. Catherine.
Excellent.
He laughed. But last year, my brothers Brian and John came to a performance I did of Sister Dorothy Stang, another character that I do, and Mary Potter, the founder of the Little Company of Mary Sisters. So to have them come into my life too, and is really pretty exciting, and was glad to feel that they felt proud as they would meet other people who were there at that evening of performance. So it is fun.
Yeah, it sounds great. Do you learn from each other in any way?
Well, Billy will say things like, Nancy, you need to cut 15 minutes. I said, well, what should I cut? Well, you want to keep that sweet piece. You want to do this. Well, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. It's like, well, no, give me some advice, And then another time he said to me, Nancy, yes, you are the only drama major in the family, but how many directors have you worked with? And so that made me say yes to another invitation to be Sister Helen Prejean at University of North Carolina, and to work and to invite another drama teacher and director to work with me on the script that I wrote. So I do take his advice in wanting to stretch my ability, and people who will not be afraid to critique me and give insight. And believe me, the brothers are not afraid to critique you.
Exactly, yeah. So the aim of the symposium in Vancouver on the 18th of October is to inspire lay people to use their gifts and talents to preach the gospel. How do you hope that St. Catherine's story will inspire the audience on that day?
I want to believe that by telling her story today, Catherine of Siena, a woman for our times, is a way for us to see who has God created for this generation that can be a peacemaker, a healer, a mystic, is able to bring reform to the church, not afraid to speak out for peace and justice. And she says, do not remain silent. Speak out as if you had 10,000 tongues. The world is going to ruin because people choose to remain silent. So you want some people to listen to this and know that maybe their response will be ability to write letters, because she did that. Others, sometimes after a performance, I will get a week later or so someone who will send me poetry that they have written, that they were inspired by her story. One of our sisters, after she saw me do the program, and she was blind, was able to take and with clay form this image of Catherine, a pleading Catherine in prayer. And I'm thinking of a time when I told this story to children in a catechism class, and that evening afterwards the student said, oh man, there's going to be so many kids in the class that weren't here tonight, they'll be so upset that they missed it. And I said, well, you could tell them this story. And they looked at me like, huh? And I said, well, if you could be a character in the story, who would you be? And one of the boys said, I want to be Mario. I want to be the Pope. I want to be her mama. And, so as they responded, and then there was this one little girl who was very quiet and shy and looking up with these big bright eyes. And I said, and I bet you could be Catherine. And she said, oh, no, I am too shy. Well, what part would you be? She says, I want to be God, which would be up in the choir loft looking down and smiling at Catherine. So it's interesting that even at age 8, children know what their gifts and talents are as they're growing to do it. And I hope that they were able to work together and tell the story. And so it's a variety of ways. People do go out and decide that they don't want to be sedentary, just watching computers or television, but that maybe with new time in their life, maybe they've raised their children, and now that they're able to be a part of some other areas of peace and justice, and to be able to work with the group. They don't have to be the leader. They can be a part of the Mantellata that Catherine had, those that were her followers, and they worked together, and together they made a big difference.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Well, Sister Nancy, we look forward to welcoming you to Vancouver in a few weeks' time, and thank you very much for today.
It's a pleasure. I look forward to it too.